Okay. Dilnoza Khasilova, did I say that right, Dilnoza? Okay, great. Is an alumna of UW getting her Ph.D. from the College of Education. She runs the World Language and Culture Program at UW, which is a volunteer and service learning program that offers free world language and culture classes for students, faculty, staff, and community members. Her work focuses on fostering global awareness, cross-cultural empathy, and understanding, essential elements for strengthening democratic systems.
Catherine. And I just wanted to say thank you for the whole group. We were working this the whole time. I learned a lot from this group and also being able to work with Robbie, hearing what they have done in the first cohort, Tennessee. And then we had a lot of great, our mentors who were guiding us throughout and just being able to read about it, like spending time about democracy, what it means, made a big difference. So my project is more practical. I think, it comes from my work with the World Language and Culture program that we mentioned. It's all about how folks who are coming from different backgrounds, from different cultures, can create this peace building, right? No matter what, or based on their values. Because unfortunately, even though democracy, we call countries democratic countries, but not countries can actually call themselves democratic, but it doesn't mean that people who live in there are not practicing their democracy, right? So I just wanted kind of to share a couple of things here, specifically what we mean by cultural dimensions, or when we're talking about the culture, how it reflects to democracy in the globalized world, but also what does it mean to us in everyday life when we're working with, in our organization with people from different backgrounds. I think today specifically, it's very important to understand what it means. So how many of us watched those high stakes conversations recently, right? Yay, thank you. So this is just one example because it happened here in the United States, but we have seen like in Europe and, Asian countries, how leaders are communicating or talking. And here is one example in a recent February, meeting at the White House where Ukraine President Zelensky came to talk to Mr. Putin, President Putin. And there's a lot of if you go back, I did a little bit of analysis how Zelensky came to White House and talked to Biden as well, President Biden. And you can see totally different, context, the way how Zelensky was behaving or talking or sharing his ideas as well. We'll be back and forth to this, slide because I would like to kind of talk about the cultural dimensions, but also coming back to this. As you can see in this picture, there's a lot of sharing, right? So when we talk about the culture, we're talking about the definition, genre as a collective ideas, being able to create this type of culture as a group of people. We're not talking about tradition, where tradition is based on individuals, where individuals are creating their own traditions, right? It could be a family tradition, a personal tradition. But being able to talk about the culture here, we're talking about Edward Halls, who is anthropologist. He talked a lot about, high and low culture communication model that really affects to the way how we communicate with people. So here, as you can see, based on high stake and then low stake communication, Zelensky is trying to share the history through the pictures, what's going on with the war and how it affects people and how it makes, to him, it's hard to explain things. And then Trump is kind of reviewing, which I think this is the moment where he's getting angry, right? Why are you telling me in public all of this where I'm not talking about this? And then, as you can see, a lot of the times we see with these, high and low culture dimensions specifically, it's not all about just conversations. It's not about the words. It's all about tone, the posture, how you carry yourself, how you talk, how you even hands. Look at this, right? Clearly, we can see the low culture communication and where Zelensky is sitting high culture communication. So although we could talk more if you are into this, cultural dimensions and intercultural learning, you probably want to learn more why Zelensky is crossing his hands, right? But this is more, we can see in a different slide what is going on here. So just to give a background, low culture context communication usually refers to Canadian countries, Australia, New Zealand, United States, right? And then we do have high context communication, mostly like Asian, Japan, Korea, Central Asia, Arab countries mostly. And then recently, scholars like, Hall and also Hofstede, who does a lot of work on cultural dimensions, actually identifying 6 specific dimensions for democracy purposes, they talk about mixed and transitional cultures, where it refers parts of Eastern Europe, where Ukraine actually in between, because they don't like refer to low or the high context communication. So when we're talking about the specific low context cultures, we're talking about, being explicit, direct, right? How many here folks who are sitting likes being direct, clear, purposeful? Cool. So, and then get to the point, right? And then maybe put everything in writing. And if you go to a different country, if you talk about writing, they're like, what are you talking about? Like writing doesn't matter here. And focus on facts and logical arguments, minimize ambiguity. So, and by many countries, if you look at the high stake communication countries, low context culture can seem as cold and aggressive rather than being like, like understanding, relationship building, or anything else. So here are the few tips that, based on the analysis I have done, but also my work in general that I do with the World Language and Culture program, bringing people together where it's just not about learning the language. This program focuses on the culture piece. And when I say culture piece, we're talking about the values, religion. When I'm teaching my language, I would like to be able to explain how do we practice that religion, Islam, or how do we actually freely talk or provide our ideas. Like I grew up, I'm originally from Uzbekistan, but I wasn't born in Uzbekistan. It's a Soviet country, right? So I grew up in Uzbekistan, but I was born in Russia, Russian territory, in Smolensk. And I've lived in Europe, but then lived most of my adulthood in Wyoming, here in the United States. And it always occurred to me how people call us that we don't have democratic values, we cannot speak up, we cannot talk openly, right? I just realized that I actually have those elements, like why I'm fitting within this culture, with an American context, being American, Russian, Uzbek now. And it just made sense that it's not based on specific particular country, but I think it's by individuals, right? And we're more talking about how do you speak up? How do you create this notion of bringing people together without having this fight? Because obviously when we talk a lot, my colleagues here talk about, free speech, and talked a lot about like, how democracy actually, works, and like in specific of Brazil example, right? So it's sometimes it's kind of impossible to label people based on their countries, but I think it's important to be able to speak up about it no matter what culture people are coming from, right? Asking the right questions, like following up with the questions, and being, some cultures make some people get irritated because they're not specific, they're trying to come from a different background. It's just because of the norms that they're trying to say. And how do we get those clues, right? The person who haven't studied that, it's very hard. And as you can see with the high context cultures, right, you see a lot of the traditional cultural behaviors where it's more about upbringing, right? How do we respect our elderly people? How do we talk to the even president in that countries, right? There's a lot of specific rules and procedures. And build relationship before diving into the business. That's one of the important things. Well, if you think about like, why Saudi Arabian representatives, like the government representative, do not like much having conversations with European leaders, it's because they don't go to this build relationship, model, right? So, and then paying attention to nonverbal cues or what's not being said, and being able to, how do you say no without saying actually with words no, right? How do we understand that this actually leader is talking about that it doesn't, like Zelensky, he tried to be more in that picture where he was showing the pictures. He tried to say things because he wanted to say that I'm representing my people, my country, right? But then also being able to show it that no, it doesn't work. He tried to bring to different evidences and talk about it. And then respect, face saving, and harmony. It's mostly this high context cultures try to work this way, but unfortunately it doesn't work with the countries who are low culture communication, right? So, and then, so we call like mixed or transitional culture. It's more about combined approaches. And I think that's the hard part because you're playing for two sides and you're trying to do your best. But I think the acknowledging hierarchy and relationships are really hard, and we can see in that conversation in February conversations, right? And balancing the task focus with relationship building. I would like you to pay attention to these two models, task focus and relationship building, because I'll be showing in the next slide specifically how it relates to us, because this is one of the Hall's specific, cultural dimension that he is paying attention for folks who works in the organization or do the job within like specific, nonprofits, that how it matters. Or being aware even historical and political context really matters when we're having those conversations, right? So it's just, maybe even acknowledging, maybe the person knows about the culture, historical, background and political context, but are we actually talking about it or acknowledging this matters? So what does it mean in our everyday communication? All based on this model, right? All the stakes, everyday stakes that we're, holding. Either it could be at the political level or everyday conversation or in our job. So cultural dimensions, like, I mentioned in the beginning, there's like two specific, models, like direct and indirect, right? So how many of you have met or been a Peace Corps volunteer? Yeah, cool. So if you go to those countries before you go, you are taught how to understand is this country direct or indirect, how to behave, what to do, the rules and laws, right? So currently I am a Peace Corps volunteer, first ever virtual program for Kyrgyzstan. Even though I'm coming from that country, that was very important for me also to know and understand and being able to put together what it means when I'm speaking as the person who is coming originally from that part of the world, and also being able to represent America, being American. So here, if you see it was direct and indirect, again, direct goes to those low culture communication, and then indirect goes to high culture communication. So people feel free to express their opinion and disagree, right? So we feel comfortable doing that. But it doesn't work for me when I'm teaching this, teachers at night. When I'm working with them, I say at night because it's usually like 11 or 12 for us PM, and then for them it's early morning. So people express their opinion and disagree only with those who they can trust. Right? So they have this trust and they say, hey, Dilnoza, I just wanted to share with you, like my boss is coming. Can we just, stop talking about this for 5 seconds and we can talk about it later, right? At that moment, I think it's kind of a big struggle for me because I'm divided. But at the same time, I would always think, how would another person who is coming from the United States, teaching this would react to this? And then if you look at the direct again, both honest and direct feedback is given, right? This is very important if you want to learn and if we want to do something. In that context, constructive feedback sometimes can be rude. Or like, it could be indirectly given, but I think it's more coming from a positive side. Everything is great, everything is awesome, but let's pay attention to this only thing. And then there is less effort on saving face and more on accomplishing tasks, right? In low culture communication, where in that part of the world, there is a great concern, and you want to balance your harmony. You want to be like, understanding what's going on right now and being able to support. And for me, especially being, talking with them and representing America was kind of like, bringing that harmony, but at the same time, making sure that they understand how and what do I do. And then last one is emphasis on placed on concrete data. They like, we like here, for example, providing data based on this data. We do this, or we, need more funding. In that part of the world, context and circumstances greatly influence the conversation. So you want to be very careful, like, what you're talking about specifically, in what context you're referring to. And I mentioned about task and relationship. It's really, really important, right? So task and relationship, in low culture communication, task procedures, plans, agendas are really important in a written form, where in this part of the world, it doesn't matter if you're in Asian countries or, high culture context, your socialization, like being able to talk to people, bringing the group of people, working with them together, sitting, no matter even if you're holding a meeting or just talking about your family, is to get to know people before work begins. I couldn't just come on and say, hey, let's go ahead and start this lesson. I'm focusing today on this, A and Z. So I had to build this relationship and tell them all about Wyoming, what I do, who I am, why did I come from, and why I'm doing this Peace Corps volunteering. And trust will build over the course of the work, right? So you don't just come here and say, hey, Catherine, I just love you so much. Let's kind of like, build this relationship and let's go to work together. No, trust is essential for, in this part of the world for collaboration. They want you to work together, to be together, and then, things will go. And then roles and responsibilities may change over time here, right? In Canada or New Zealand, in the United States, where roles and responsibilities are often clearly defined. And I think thinking about the democracy as well, right? And then all this what we're doing, it's so important, like, for folks. I don't want to say that only low culture folks need to know their rules or high culture contexts need to know. I just feel like the both sides need to understand and work it out and to understand each other's culture. And that's where, based in my work with world languages as well, I don't always say that you're coming here, Americans need to learn about you. No, you have to learn about the American culture, and American culture folks need to learn about your culture. How can we do that together? And then the last one, work and personal lives are separate, right? In low culture communication, where this is where it comes a little bit dirty. So work and personal lives overlaps a lot of the times. People can come and tell you all about what's going on in their lives, and all of a sudden talk about it, and you're like, what? Why this matters? Like, why we're talking about it? Yeah. So I guess so what, this question, right? What does it mean? Why do we need to do this? I guess, for me as a person who has been doing this and lived in different cultures and worked and communicated, especially, fighting for these democratic values and things that what I value and what I do, I feel like, as I said, I'm not afraid to say things that I value and respect, and I go for it, which probably wouldn't work in the country where I grew up mostly, but still I was able to navigate this culture and being able to express that. So learning about the other cultures is good. We all do it, right? So we learn, we watch movies, how we do that. But developing adaptive skills that are clearly important for us and to navigate these cultural differences is hard. So that's kind of a message saying that let's not talk about that. Oh, I have this family members who are from Pakistan. I know all about it, so I'm good about it. No, it takes a long time to understand and actually compare and just being respectful to folks from different backgrounds. And a cultural intelligence isn't just academic knowledge, right? It's a practice, skill set that is important for our, again, like, in this globalized world, like talking about it and not saying, bringing the facts, but being able actually to do it in action and help folks. So yeah, please consider how cultural differences influence everyday communication, and just even somewhere maybe just being able to humble, being human in this world today where it's clearly we are all struggling. It's not one person who is struggling right now, right? Just even in this context and all this, the whole world, I would say, being able just even to empathize, like, and being able to listen really helps a lot. Thank you.